But they also do a lot of business through, hundreds of independent distributors scattered throughout the country. And those independent distributors are critical. They're absolutely critical to getting a variety of competing products onto retail shelves. If you have a really powerful market player attempting to control or influence what independent distributors put on their trucks and get onto shelves, then you have a real competitive problem. And the concern here is that with a bigger AB-Inbev, SABMiller, you'd have an even more powerful company with even stronger incentives to use distribution and to influence the indies to carry their own products at the expense of carrying rivals' products. And so what we do know is AB-Inbev has been very aggressive about integrating into distribution. They've bought distributors. They've swapped distributors between Kentucky and Colorado. That was just recent. They're also apparently on a bit of a buying spree and picking up craft brewers, right? I live in Boulder, Colorado, and commute to the East Coast, but that Breckenridge Brewery was just purchased. That was a real go-to craft brewer in the state of Colorado. So by controlling distribution and having such a presence in brewing itself, the company has these incentives to favor their own products over the products of rivals and get distributors to carry their own. And they can do that through a variety of mechanisms, contracts, how they write their contracts with the independent distributors. So we're more than a little worried about that and the effect of those incentives on the craft brewing industry. I've spent a lot of time going around the country talking to craft brewers like yourself and trying to pulse them on what they think about the merger, what their concerns should be, or what they are and what they should be, and figuring out ways to sort of get craft brewers organized in a way that would give them some critical mass. Not only nationally, but in states where there's a particularly vibrant craft brewing industry. And that's another question. Trying to get a set of sort of smaller, aggressive, vibrant entrepreneurs that we find in the craft brewing industry, trying to get them organized so that they can speak with one voice about this merger and how it would affect them. And I got to tell you, I've had dozens of fascinating conversations with craft brewers, learning about their products, learning about their culture, learning about their business models. But I've been a little surprised at how difficult it is to sort of get organized and get the craft brewers to speak with one voice. You have a very good trade organization based in Boulder, and they've done a really, really good job of sort of messaging out on this merger. But given how much the craft brewing industry is potentially at stake here, I mean, these are high stakes. This could be a significant loss of competition from a really important sector in the brewing industry. So we're trying to get everybody more energized and educated about how important it is for craft brewers to speak out.
And it sounds like, and to speak to that in a way is a lot of us craft breweries and craft brewers, I would say the majority of us have, and as it stands now, you've got the independent distributors, right, guys, that houses, as we call them, that aren't owned by Miller or Coors, aren't affiliated with Miller or Coors or Budweiser. And they're just totally independent, right, completely on their own. And we have one of those here in Florida that we do business with outside of our local footprint called Cavalier. And Cavalier is completely independent. Right. And then we do have a Miller Coors house, which is a fantastic job for us here locally called J.J. Taylor. And so I think, and this is just my perspective here, and I'm always careful not to talk on behalf of any other craft brewer, but I think what happens is a lot of we sort of align ourselves for whatever our business model is to get into market with a house, and that house is going to be the options that we have are an independent house, or a Miller Coors house, or a Budweiser house, and so and I, although I have my very strong personal opinions that I'll share with you over a pint sometime in D.C. At Port City Brewing at my buddy Bill Butcher's place, but I have my very strong opinions that I won't share now, but I would guess that some of these people or some of these brewers, particularly the ones that are affiliated with their Budweiser houses, and there are very good Budweiser distributors, but I would just guess that it's sort of a don't bite the hand that feeds you type of scenario, where, hey, they're, if I speak too loudly about this or against this, then I've got Big Brother looking down at me and now wants to slap my hand. And I would just guess that you have a little bit of that going on with some of the craft brewers and maybe some of the reluctance to speak out. They don't want to put their head on the chopping block, so to speak. So I would guess that would have something to do with some of the reluctance from some of the guys to want to speak out or against this. That's just my thoughts on that, or my take on that. If you might see that when you're out meeting with some of these craft brewers. And then it sounds like too, talking about this, we talk about essentially the number one and number two, right, as far as beer suppliers in the world, teaming up together. And even though technically it shouldn't, if you read any of the memorandums or press releases, it shouldn't affect things in the States here. But I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like this could be a scenario where when we talk about incentives and the aggressive incentives that we know that the Budweiser distributors or the company, the AB-Inbev company itself plays or levies upon their distributors, it sounds like, they might, the Miller Coors product, because of the global structure, could be either overlooked or part of the incentive as well. So now we're not just worried about necessarily AB-Inbev. We're worried about AB-Inbev, and they're looking out just not for the Budweiser owned products. They're also kind of looking out for the Miller Coors or the Miller products as well. Is that right to guess or to speculate? So now we don't just worry about the Budweiser products. We're worried about the Miller products too. And when we talk about control and the power of those guys.
Well, so you've raised a really, really good point, and so I just want to jump in and make sure that we sort of highlight a really important difference between the AB-Inbev's approach towards distribution versus Miller Coors' approach to distribution. So Miller Coors owns one distributor I believe, one distributor in the United States. They have not pursued the same strategy as AB-Inbev with distribution, where AB-Inbev has gone in, they've purchased distributorships. They are wholly, they have wholly owned distribution in several states, and they have a pretty aggressive approach with independent distributors in getting them, contractually to favor their brands over the brands of rivals. Miller Coors is very different. Miller Coors, like I said, doesn't have as much wholly owned distribution, nearly as much. And they have been pretty friendly, actually, with independent distributors. They have not been as aggressive and assertive with independent distributors in trying to get them to favor their own products. So you have two very different mentalities towards distribution. And here's the problem. The merger would take the Miller mentality out of the mix. So if Miller has been the friendlier of the two, sort of the more, the more friendly towards competition in their approach to independent distributors, if you take them out of the mix through the merger, if you eliminate that voice in the mix, then that's a potentially bad development, because then you're left with ABI with a relatively more aggressive approach to distribution and independent distributors. And the concern is this: if this proposal to divest, the Miller part of the JV over to Molson Coors goes down, if that actually happens as a fix for the merger, we don't know what Molson Coors is going to do toward, what their stance will be towards distribution. We know we're losing Miller, which has been pretty friendly to distribution, so that important dynamic is going to be gone from the market. It's a little bit of a mystery or an unknown as to how Molson Coors will be positioning itself vis-a-vis distribution if they were to acquire the Miller part of the Miller Coors joint venture. We don't know. Molson Coors might have more incentives to sort of follow ABI's policies on distribution and, sort of mimic them and be more aggressive towards independent distributors than they do now. Molson Coors is a North American company. It's not a global company like SABMiller is, so there may be different dynamics there in terms of how they compete in the market. So all of those factors create a little bit of unease and concern about how this sort of new market player, Molson Coors, if they were to acquire those assets, the Miller assets, how they would be competing in the market. And, that introduces quite a bit of uncertainty into the equation. All those independent distributor contracts might have to be renegotiated if the Miller assets are divested to Molson Coors. That would introduce some, even more uncertainty into the process. So that's really sort of the kernel of what's going on there. And of course, the craft brewers are the ones who are sort of flapping out there in the wind in terms of how they're going to be treated after the merger and after any divestiture to Molson Coors. They're the ones who are facing the most uncertainty. And I think you're absolutely right. The incentives are to keep the head down. Let's just keep my head down. I've got my distribution contracts. All is well. My products are getting onto shelves and into the hands of consumers. But the problem is that could change with the merger. With the changed incentives, with any divestiture of Miller to Molson Coors, with this sort of the uncertainty around how Molson Coors is going to approach distribution, all of that can change. And we don't want, craft brewers to be on the short end of the stick when it comes to, how the post-merger market would operate. And so we've been trying to get craft brewers to speak to us about their concerns about distribution. And by the way, from what my small sampling is that they once you start talking to craft brewers about the importance of distribution and how that might change after this merger, then the eyes kind of open up and they say, wow, okay, I guess you're right. There is potentially a big change afoot, and I should be worried and concerned about that. Well, but I think you're absolutely right. The incentive is to keep the head down, and not make waves.
When you talk about the difference in approaches from the Miller aspect versus are the Miller houses, if you will, the indies who distribute Miller products, or Miller as a company, versus how the Budweiser guys, their approach is to distribution, I can share a personal story with that. And back when we were shopping for distributors, I'm not going to say who and I'm not going to say where, but I will just say that and JDub is a very rapidly growing brewery. But as we were looking at these as some of these distributors, we sat down, and I listen to the completely independents that don't distribute any of the big beers, if you will. I listen to the Miller guys, and I listen to the Budweiser guys. I want to hear what they all have to say. I want to give them all their shot because, like I said earlier, I know that there are some great Budweiser houses out there. But this particular distributor that I was talking to, when I sat down and listened to the Budweiser distributor's pitch, they put up a slide of 3 different local craft brewers. Actually, one was, and I believe one was a national brand, but an independent national brand, and 2 of the others were locals, and they were pictures of their tap handles, and they said these are the tap handles that we are going to take. And they said, and we fight and we win. And that was their whole ethos. And they repeated fight and win. I can't tell you how many times. And quite honestly, it disgusted me because I will never, ever use my beer to hurt another brewery or to take someone's tap handles. My approach is the capitalistic approach, which is if I have a product that fits that account, a high-quality product that might do better than another one, then mine deserves to be in there. Not I'm going to fight, battle, kill, slaughter these other people, these other craft breweries of all people to take their handles. So, and then, when I met with, and I did not see that, and I have yet to see that, and I don't know if I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but with the Miller houses that I've talked to, I have never seen that approach, and quite honestly, I wouldn't sign a distribution contract with anybody who was telling me that they were going to fight, kill, battle, and win over other craft breweries. That is the anti-craft beer sort of spirit I think that we have to kill each other, right? At least hopefully it'll stay that way for as long as I'm involved in it. But you did speak to that difference in distribution sort of philosophies, where one is sort of friendly to the craft. It's a friendly sort of, hey, they're here and let's go ahead and embrace it approach. And then the other is, hey, we're the king of beers, and we're going to crush any would-be competition, no matter the size. And again, I don't want to speak for you, and I'm trying not to let my opinions be too